Welcome back to the critique. So we're looking at a summary of John C. Maxwell's Everyone Communicates, Few Connect, which lays out 7 principles for moving beyond just talking at people to actually engaging them.
Yeah, and it's a really well-organized summary. It absolutely nails the spirit of the book, great examples. The creator clearly gets the material inside and out.
Totally. The foundation is rock solid. So we're going to dive right in on how to maximize the conceptual impact here, because there are a few places where we can sharpen these ideas into really powerful takeaways.
I agree. Let's start with that first chapter, putting others first. The summary uses some great, powerful stories.
Hmm.
You've got Carlos Nabisala with Gloria Jean's coffee, Tom Arrington helping his employees. They're strong pillars for that idea of prioritizing your audience.
Stronger if it defined the boundary between, say, genuine prioritization and just strategic compromise.
Right, that's the key. Because the weakness right now is that it champions putting the audience first in a way that feels, well, a little soft. You know?
A little too easy?
Exactly. It kind of implies that prioritizing others always leads to this immediate, happy alignment, and it overlooks those tough spots where a leader has to prioritize the long-term vision or profitability over what the audience wants right now.
And that opens up a small conceptual gap, doesn't it? If putting others first just means giving people what they want, it starts to clash with the ideas of vision and conviction that Maxwell talks about later. It almost makes connection feel passive.
Passive accommodation, yeah, not active leadership. That's the tension we need to get into. I mean, connection is hard work. If a leader just folds every time, they actually lose credibility.
So the suggestion is to introduce a discussion that really probes that inherent conflict. When does a leader's strategic path clash with what the audience wants? That refines the whole idea of putting others first, from just being agreeable to making an active, value-driven choice.
It makes the lesson so much more influential. It frames it as a tough strategic call, not just a feel-good gesture.
Okay, so how do we make that concrete for the reader?
Well, let's take that Nabi Saleh example. The summary talks about him giving customers comfortable chairs, better sight lines, brilliant stuff.
Right?
But what if we added a scenario right after that? What if his Australian customers suddenly demanded a product line, I don't know, like really complex, expensive smoothies that was just financially unsustainable for the global brand?
Ah, I see. That immediately forces you to define where the leader has to draw the line.
Yes. It links Chapter 1, caring, directly to Chapter 7, credibility. Because caring for the audience also means protecting the long-term health of the whole enterprise, which sometimes means saying no.
Mm. And we can do the same thing with the Tom Arrington example, right? With his 2 questions?
Exactly. He asks, do you want to keep your job? And then, do you want me to help you? The summary should really dig into the tension in that first question.
I love that, because that first question it's brutal, but it's honest. It sets these really clear, high-stakes expectations before he offers to help.
It proves that putting others first isn't soft. It's a firm, supportive challenge toward a shared goal, in this case, survival. It's tough love.
And that kind of strategic tension, that's what elevates the entire chapter. It shows connection isn't about avoiding conflict. It's about leading through it with conviction.
And that idea of conviction, of showing it, that brings us right to our second point.
The immediate visual side of it.
Yeah. If you have to make tough choices, that conviction has to be readable on your face, in your posture, which brings us to nonverbal congruence.
Now, Chapter 2, Communicate Beyond Words, is handled really well in the summary. It uses Mariband's 90% rule, the thought, emotion, action framework. Great stuff.
And the contrasting examples are fantastic. General Patton in the Lee tank versus that awful mushroom farm lament.
Okay, but here's the structural issue we see. While the chapter has these powerful examples, separating the immediate failure of nonverbal congruence from the discussion of long-term credibility in Chapter 7, it sort of weakens the overall punch of the summary.
Right. The weakness is that congruence, the alignment of your words, your tone, and your body language, it's talked about more as a description than a prescription. It misses the chance to really hammer home that incongruence is the #1 instantaneous connection killer.
So the summary is treating nonverbals as like supportive details when they're actually the prerequisite. The audience judges your visual authenticity in a split second.
Way before they even process the 7% of words you're saying.
Exactly.
So our suggestion here is to strengthen that structural link. Explicitly frame Chapter 2 around the immediate visual and emotional test of congruence, a test the audience runs within seconds.
That's a much cleaner architecture. Chapter 2 is the instant test, the gatekeeper, and then Chapter 7, credibility, which is built over 6 months. That's just the long-term version of the same principle.
Yes, you fail the instant visual test, you don't even get a chance to start the 6-month credibility test.
So how do we restructure it?
Let's lead with that idea, that the audience is immediately scanning for harmony. Take the story of Laura Surovic, the killer whale trainer. Her commitment had to be visually and emotionally evident. That's the 55% and 38% before her words could ever land with that animal.
The audience is the killer whale.
The audience is the killer whale. And that conveys the urgency perfectly. And then we use the mushroom farm lament as the catastrophic failure of that test.
For anyone who doesn't know it, it's that analogy where employees feel like they're kept in the dark and fed manure.
It's such a visceral image. The summary needs to highlight how that scenario is a failure of immediate congruence. The visual of the darkness, the emotional feeling of, well, it destroys connection faster than any memo ever could.
That reframing makes the visual and emotional stuff essential, not just extra detail. It really raises the stakes early on.
It makes connection about integrity under pressure, which brings us perfectly to the end of the book, the call to action.
Right. Chapter 6. The summary does a great job detailing how connectors inspire action. It's got the inspiration equation, know, see, feel, and the ACT acronym. It's all very functional.
It is. The challenge here, though, is that if you're aiming for masterful connection, to be like a Lincoln or a Martin Luther King Jr., the action plan feels a bit tactical, a bit small.
Like a checklist.
Yeah. It talks about these huge figures who embody change, but then the action steps are sort of temporary behavior changes.
So the weakness is that just doing the techniques is temporary. We need to push the listener toward becoming the person who lives these principles. The action step needs to be elevated from a behavior to a full-on identity shift.
Exactly. So the suggestion is to frame the call to action not as try this technique, but as adopt this new professional identity, and then commit to a public, high-stakes demonstration of it.
That's a much higher level of commitment. It's not what I do, it's who I am. But how do you make that actionable without it just sounding philosophical?
Well, we can use that Will Smith quote, the one that asks, how many people do you make want to be better? And then we turn that into an action item. We challenge the listener to publicly adopt a moniker for themselves.
A moniker.
Yeah. Like for the next week, they have to call themselves the simplifier or the bridge builder, something high stakes.
I like that. That's an existential challenge. If you call yourself the simplifier, you can't walk into a meeting the next day with a 50-slide PowerPoint deck.
You just can't. The challenge is to adopt the identity and then report back on how it actually shaped your behavior. It pulls all the principles from the book into one single challenge.
And we could even integrate say less from Chapter 4, make it really concrete.
How so?
Challenge them to take their most complex, dreaded presentation and shrink it down to the length of Maxwell's shortest speech.
Which is...
Everything rises and falls on leadership. That's it. 7 words.
Oh, that's powerful. Because it forces ruthless prioritization. It makes you embody that principle of doing the hard work for your audience. It moves way beyond knowing the rules to actually living them under pressure.
Yeah, this whole package of feedback really just focuses on strengthening the internal architecture of the summary, which is already so good.
So, just to quickly recap, we looked at 3 main areas. First, refining the idea of prioritization, defining those strategic trade-offs in putting others first to turn it from a passive idea into active leadership.
Second, we suggested structurally maximizing the weight of nonverbal congruence by framing it as that immediate visual test an audience gives you, which makes it the gatekeeper to long-term credibility.
And finally, elevating that call to action, moving the listener away from just trying behaviors to committing to a real, transformative identity shift using things like a public moniker or an extreme simplification challenge.
And these changes should take what's already a fantastic summary and turn it into a truly insightful, powerfully structured guide for anyone who wants to move from just communicating to truly connecting.
Thank you so much for sharing your work with us. We invite you to implement these ideas and please submit your revised material back for a follow-up. We'd love to see the transformation.